Hello, Catholic Reply students. This is Mrs. Politsky, and I have your notes for Chapter 4, Section 3, Beliefs and Practices of Islam. So, we need to talk a little bit about these beliefs and practices. First, the belief in one God is central to the belief of all Muslims, and it's known as the Shahada. Muslims, for the most part, don't really have a creed, but they do have a saying that they say every time that they pray, and that is, there is no God but God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God. So, the core tenets of Islam, free will is an internal um, part of being human. God is the judge of all and determines who will spend eternity in heaven or hell. God is all loving, powerful, knowing, merciful, and present. God gives life and takes life away. Divine providence. Muhammad is the messenger of God. God is the creator and sustainer of the universe. God is very involved as a guide in human affairs. When we talk about biblical prophets mentioned in the Quran, you have Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, Aaron, Jacob and his sons, Job, Jesus, and the five pillars of faith. So, first pillar is known as the Shahada, which we just got done talking about. That's the witnessing. There is no God but God. So, every day, an individual known as the Muezzin. This is a person who is kind of in charge of calling for prayer. Will call this, and he does this from what is known as a minaret, which is kind of a tall pillar from which the call to morning prayer comes from. Second pillar is the Salah. This is prayer 5 times a day. And there's some different traditions that kind of go along with that. There's the wudu, which is the ritual cleansing that takes place typically when a person goes into a mosque. But to be prepared for prayer, one must wash their arms, their hands, the inside of their mouth, their face and head, eventually their feet. And once this is done, then a person is prepared to receive God. Okay, you have the Qibla. This is basically the facing towards the direction of the Kaaba or towards the city of Mecca. And when we talk about prayer, typically the holy day of the week, the Sabbath would be Friday, or is the Juma, aka Friday prayer. The Saka, this is the third pillar. It's known as almsgiving. An individual is called to give 2.5 times one's savings. Fourth pillar is the Swam. This is fasting during the month of Ramadan. This is be the 9th Islamic lunar month. And one of the things that happens at the end of Ramadan is a kind of a holy day or a festival known as Eid al-Fitr, which is known as the breaking of the fast. And we'll talk a little bit more about that coming up. The fifth pillar is the Hajj. This is the pilgrimage. Abraham submitted to the will of God in Mecca. And when we talk about Muhammad and such, there is the Zamzam, which is basically a well that is kind of got some divine principles to it, but it's located about 20 miles east of the Kaaba. And for many people who go on the Hajj, this is kind of a very holy site. It's believed that the waters were divinely blessed, and they might have some kind of supernatural kind of things associated with them. Uh, there's also some other rituals that go along with that. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But kind of following the Hajj, there's something known as Eid al Adha, which is kind of another holy day, if you want to call it that, or another feast. And this is very reminiscent of when you think about the story from the Old Testament of Abraham and Isaac. But in this case, it's not so much Isaac as it is Ishmael, who would be the other son of Abraham. And supposedly, this is a feast that commemorates um, Abraham following the divine will of God in offering his son Ishmael as a sacrifice, and God or Allah stopping him. And thus, today, the big celebration here is the eating of a lamb as a way to commemorate that. And usually, this is celebrated by many people who go on the Hajj, kind of at the end of their pilgrimage. Islamic living, when we talk about community, you have the Ummah. This is an Islamic community. It's kind of known collectively as a nation. You have the also the Shahada, which we just talked about. There is no God but God. This is a sign of belief and submission to Allah. Way of life. Allah is not only the ruler on earth, but in every aspect of a Muslim's life. And the Quran guides Islamic society and day-to-day life. So everything from how the family is led to the gender roles within the family itself, all that is kind of basically pertained within the Quran itself. We mentioned the zakah, which is the poor tax. Each Muslim is called to care for the needy and enforce by law of Muslim nations. So Islamic living, the Shahara, which is Islamic law, it's the centerpiece of Islamic life. It's guidance from God on how to live the way He desires, both individually and society-wise. It's the primary sources of the Quran, such as obligations, permissions, prohibitions, and the Sunnah, which is basically the rules for Islamic practice. The ulama, which is a Muslim scholar that's been trained in Islam and Islamic law. This is kind of found more with the Sunni faith. This is based on a consensus and reasoning of a group. It uses analogies for reasonings. When we talk about Islamic life, when we talk about women, the rights of women are within the Quran and the Sunnah would be such as the right to own and inherit and to buy and sell property. There's the right to free choice in marriage, meaning that you can choose who you want to marry, and also the right to divorce, the right for maintenance and education. In other words, the right to have things done. I mean, as far as like appearances, to have that opportunity to learn, independent personhood before the court of law, meaning that you can have yourself represented as an individual and not necessarily be represented by others. The right to any earnings from any efforts from which their husband cannot take charge without their permission. The dress, you have the hijab, which is basically the covering of the head. Loose fitting clothes, all of this must be long to cover up the body. It's modest. When we talk about roles of women, women can be artists, investors, teachers, scholars, spiritual and political leaders. There are some cases where there is extreme segregation of women. Um, and this is kind of a cultural tradition that dates back even well before the time of Islam. Thank you very much.